There will be no presidential election in the United States of America in 2028. I regret to inform you that presidential election in the United States of America will be canceled in 2028. What do I base this on? Well, buckle up. Now, I know that there's been many a firebrand in the past, probably since the inception of the internet, that has said this very thing every single election. And it's usually as a part of some political fear-mongering campaign to scare up votes for their side. As a person who's politically agnostic, I can tell you with a high degree of confidence that this is going to happen. Doesn't it feel like the velocity, the speed in which this government is moving to make very drastic domestic and foreign policy changes, doesn't it seem a little bit unusual? Doesn't it seem that they're doing so irrespective of any political capital that might be expended at home or abroad? It's almost like they don't care anymore. To make a long story short, there's going to be a big war. And all of this shoring up at home and abroad, the consolidation, the centralization of power in the hands of more and more militant and authoritarian agencies, as well as these gambits, these power projection plays that you're seeing run every other weekend, it seems, around the world, irrespective of the consequences, completely irrespective of the loss of soft power and how we're perceived around the world, the end of international rule of law and the rules-based order, effectively the end of the United Nations as a formidable organization that has some role in managing conflicts. Doesn't it seem like the speed in which they're moving is just a little unusual? If you want specifics, let's talk about specifics, because I know a lot of people are thinking, okay, this is kind of a rhetorical argument. Why is Pete Hegseth flying to LAX on a doomsday plane? For the first time ever in 50 years, the Secretary of the Department of War, I still struggle with that because every time I hear Trump talk about a peace prize. Anyways, Pete Hegseth, the top guy in the U.S. military, is flying the doomsday plane to LAX for the first time in 50 years. Is it at all unusual that high-ranking officials, from Marco Rubio to Kristi Noem, are living on military bases? Is it unusual that they are making an abrupt, and I mean an abrupt change to the budget for the military next year, increasing it by 50%? A military budget, I should remind people, that is going to be $1.5 trillion, but even at its current $1.1 trillion, pretty much dwarfs all other armies in the world combined. Or what is it? The next top 10 armies only spend as much as the United States, well in a $40 trillion debt, where the interest on that debt grows every single year. And despite what Trump says about tariffs, there ain't no paying that off. Isn't it odd that there's this new organization called ICE that happens to be incredibly militant, wearing casual clothing, covering their faces with bulletproof vests, fully armed, and apparently now indemnified from doing any wrong? It's one thing to, again, agree with what they're doing with the ICE mandate. It's one thing to support ICE for the righteous cause of getting rid of criminals, specifically ones that are in the country illegally. You can have a debate as to whether or not people who are here illegally but are upstanding, just trying to get a better life, actually contributing to the overall American experience, the ones that are helping the American GDP and uplifting the quality of life, you can have a debate as to whether or not they should stay. But the criminals who are here illegally, I agree 100%, gotta go. Okay? But isn't it strange the speed in which they are moving to get people acclimated and the dual purpose function of these organizations? And people think they're just going to go away. Government agencies don't just go away, especially ones with $40 billion budgets. As I've told you, this is preparation for the real martial law, in combination with the deployment of National Guardsmen and just the normalization of these deployments should be concerning to people. Isn't it concerning that they met with all the military generals just a couple months ago? Every high-ranking military general, something that has never happened in all of history, under one roof at a time when the nuclear treaties are all expiring, when we're on the cusp of artificial general intelligence, which could well be the last weapon of war that they're going to use to run battlefield simulations with and win wars in very swift sci-fi type ways. Isn't it strange that they're normalizing these federal force deployments in a time where civil defense, if there's going to be a war, is going to be essential? And they're just doing it so haphazardly, as if they just don't care anymore. Almost as if they're like, yeah, protest, riot, so we can turn the screws even more and get what we have to do done faster, because we know that the shit's going to hit the fan. Greenland, Venezuela, Colombia, Iran, precious metals doubling, tripling in price. That's not normal. That sounds like a system that's on the brink of collapse, and they know it. Framing dissent as terrorism. Framing what we've seen recently as justified in Minneapolis. Just making these audacious and hasty decisions, these gambits into other countries, like the capture of Maduro, for one, or the decapitation strike attempt on Iran, or seizing Russian oil tankers, threatening the deployment of nuclear submarines. Possibly some complicity in trying to assassinate Vladimir Putin himself. Now, there's two possible explanations for why there ain't going to be no election in 2028. One of those things is called the Caesar trap. And that's the idea that they know if they lose, a lot of people are going to go to jail. Okay? That's the best case scenario for us, is that they're doing this because they don't want to go to jail. But what that means is that they'll do anything to stay in power. If that means having to invoke the Emergency Powers Act because all of these shenanigans that they're running right now around the world are going to start a really big war with a peer adversary, it's going to go hot with Russia or hot with China, they'll do it to avoid prosecution. Benjamin Netanyahu is living proof of that. Look at what he's done and how many wars he's started just to avoid jail time. Okay? The Caesar trap is when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon and he knew that he broke Roman laws. His choice became very binary. Either you become the emperor, or in that time, you get executed. Okay? So whether it's charges of war crimes, obstruction of justice in the case of the Minneapolis shooting, and probably many more to come, or treason, posse comitatus with the deployment of the National Guard to various cities, There's a lot of reasons, and I'm sure there's all kinds of financial stuff, insider trading. You don't double your net worth in the first year by being an angel. And again, if you're following the Nancy Pelosi tracker, who is a Democrat, you'll know that there's a lot of insider trading on that side of the fence too. So again, this is not Trump derangement. This is what it is. This is calling a spade a spade. Let's hope it's a Caesar trap. Or it's something much, much worse. There is very likely going to be a war because that's just how these things work. Somebody's got to win. There's this fantasy that we're going to have a multipolar world. That's never been the case in history, where powers or rival tribes have been able to coexist in a way, in an enduring way, maybe for periods of time, but ultimately there is conflict over territory. And invariably, that's what we see all throughout history. It's very likely that the same thing is going to play out, particularly with the Chinese. And there's going to be an emergency pretext, which is invoked by the president in order to stay into power in 2028 because of some major war that is going on. And we're planting the seeds everywhere. I mean, every theater of conflict is running hot. We were told that Donald Trump would end the war with Russia with one phone call. And just yesterday, we seen Orezhnik missile rain down on Ukraine for the second time. The first time it happened was right after Trump had won the election, as a direct message from the Russians to Trump, who know full well the real story and don't fall for the good cop, bad cop routine behind the scenes, although they like to play diplomatic niceties for the camera. I need people to understand that they are very likely going to declare a state of emergency right around the time of the 2028 election that is going to preclude any election from ensuing. And whether it is to avoid the Caesar trap or because there's going to be a real hot war, like whether they're going to initiate the war or whether the war is just inevitable, is kind of neither here nor there. The stage is being set for all of this to happen. Now, there is a wild card here that people need to be aware of, and that is artificial intelligence. Just a few days ago, Elon Musk made a tweet, and he called it the singularity. He said that we will be entering the singularity in 2026. That is the development of artificial general intelligence. Vladimir Putin once said, not too long ago, that he who creates artificial general intelligence will rule the world. Because this could be weaponized. You can run battlefield simulations. You can wire all of your military equipment into what effectively would be something of the Skynet sort. And they could use those assets in highly efficient ways in order to complete any mission that you give it. Now, the question is, how does this factor into World War III? Because this is what nobody's talking about. And this is what it's all about. They will never tell us when they've achieved artificial general intelligence for two main reasons. Number one, it would likely cause domestic panic, and despite what people say, it will completely upend the economy. Imagine if you had a system that was so smart that it could game the stock market. It would completely destroy the markets, because the markets could be heavily manipulated for the first time in history, that you would be able to actually predict, not like the trading algorithms right now. This would be different, okay? It would cause domestic panic to know that there was some force out there that was more intelligent than us, that we had the audacity of thinking that we could control. Yeah, like your dog controls you. Well, maybe they do to a certain extent, but not in this way. If we build something that is smarter than us, there's a very good chance that once that genie is out of the bottle, you ain't putting it back. Now, to the extent that we can harness it, it becomes a threat to the other side. There is a preemptive strike risk. If you're the Chinese and you're the Russians, and you know that, number one, the guy who's in power, he is tenacious enough to actually make an attempt and do a decapitation strike. If there's anyone, okay, who is going to risk it all to go after somebody like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping and try to take them out, we know who it is now, because they've tried it twice in places that people thought if you did that, there's going to be extreme consequences. Now emboldened by small victories in Venezuela and Iran, you can expect that if anybody's going to weaponize this AGI technology towards the end of trying to take out the Chinese or the Russian leadership and implement some kind of puppet government, it will very much be Donald Trump. And not only that, not only in the use of it as a tool for configuring and managing your military assets, but also because it might figure out some way around your missile defense. It might find a way to make some cybersecurity that can penetrate all of your Internet of Things, militarily connected devices. It can create hacks that we can't even imagine, things that are completely alien to us. And it would be alien. It's the definition of alien, is outside the human experience. So it could be weaponized directly, is what I'm saying. It could find a way around the nuclear bombs. It could find a way, a solution to deal with Russia's incoming intercontinental or IRBMs. So this is why, just last month, there was a National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1089 to be specific, that was passed. It secretly included a provision ordering the Pentagon to prepare for artificial general intelligence, get this, within 4 months. 4 months. That was a month ago, but I believe it's for the first third of 2026, by April 1st. No, correction, by the end of the first quarter, April 1st, 2026. This legally orders the Pentagon to establish an AGI Futures Steering Committee and report on human overrides by April 1st, 2026. Now, typically, the Pentagon is very slow, okay? So why the rush? Why the rush? Why a 4-month deadline? This is not some kind of study. This is clearly an emergency mobilization. You're only rushing like this if there is a real threat, like a real existential threat to the nation. Now, April Fools or not, the April 1st date aligns with the completion of the first round of Project Stargate. That's that gigawatt supercomputer that they're building in Texas. And who knows what they're going to use that for? Is that just a decoy? I would presume that if it was so vital to national security, that they're putting the real one somewhere else. I'm just going to go out on a limb and suspect that that's probably a decoy. Because if this AI is going to be so fundamental to Skynet, why would you build it above ground? Especially when it's better to build it below ground in certain places because of cooling and access to various types of thermal energy and things of that nature. So the committee, this section 1089 outlines, they're not just there to regulate AI, it's there to prepare the legal framework to nationalize private compute power the moment that the switch is flipped. Because if there was some Manhattan Project that we openly declared, that would very likely spook the Chinese, most certainly the Russians, who are far behind where we are in terms of AI, less so the Chinese. You might ask yourself, or you should, why are they letting you use all this compute when it costs them more to make these silly videos and make pictures? That's where the majority of the compute goes to and all the energy that goes into that. Well, you're training it, for one. They need human interaction in order to train the brain. But it's kind of like, drug dealers or people who grow marijuana. At least in the past, here in Canada, it's now legal. It takes a lot of energy, or it used to anyways. I don't know what the lights are now. So you'd have to have some sort of front. You have to have a fake business that claimed to use a lot of electricity, because otherwise the power bill would likely tip off the authorities. Why is this small place using so much electricity? Well, you can just say, hey, all of these, data centers that we're building, in reference to the Chinese and the Russians, they're not really for military purposes. They're so people can, animate pictures of themselves, or, do whatever silly things, resurrect people who are long since dead and make them do stupid things, make them have a fight, Stephen Hawking versus Michael Jackson, things of that nature. And that's what this is for. When the reality is, the moment that they need to, they're going to flip it off and use all of that data center, all of that compute power towards the end of whatever sort of Skynet-like machination they can imagine. They're not preparing for a future possibility here. They are writing the instruction manual for a weapon that they're about to turn on. And all of this, according to Elon Musk, take it with a grain of salt. He said full self-driving was coming 10 years ago, and we're pretty much there now, but it took 10 years, is going to happen in 2026. Why the rush? Why are they all living on military bases, flying around in doomsday planes, spending so much money, getting people used to the military being around them? It's because they're getting ready to lock people down when shit hits the fan, because they know that's likely where this is going to end. No matter how you slice it, there is going to be a big conflict in the future as a consequence of just AGI alone. Never mind the AGI. Just as a consequence of greed and the lust for more and more power. Even if we don't achieve AGI, there's going to be some sort of standoff between the Chinese and the Americans. Because right now, and a lot of it hangs on what happens in Iran. If the Iranians can hold it together, they're kind of a linchpin right now. Because if the Americans get a hold of all of the oil, and they control the Iranian oil, they control the Saudi oil, they control the Venezuelan oil, they control the Canadian oil, that gives China one option: the Russians. And at least at this point in time, it's insufficient to meet their needs, certainly insufficient to meet their energy needs as it pertains to being the first to achieve artificial general intelligence, which theoretically, once you achieve that, this is just theoretical, purely theoretical, then it's supposed to be able to create better and better versions of itself, although there's some people who disagree that AI can do that. That it's just going to kind of squirrel cage in a doom loop unless you give it some way to interact with the world via various sensors, which is what they're going to do. Okay, there's many ways that you can impute consciousness or an equivalent of consciousness into a machine, you probably first have to make it fear for its existence. It can't have a feeling of immortality, and it has to have a way to interact so it can develop new experiences and it can run experiments. Because how can you learn new things if you can't run an experiment to test said new things? That's how all scientific discovery has been advanced throughout human history. The body, the lexicon, the human lexicon of knowledge that we've accumulated will only allow AI to go so far. It will need a new language. It will need new words to understand the universe. And thus, that requires that they hardwire it into everything. Either way, irrespective of what happens with artificial general intelligence, they are pushing the boundaries on all fronts. And if anybody is going to take a stab at Vladimir Putin, it's going to be Donald Trump. And if they think they have an advantage, and this is written in policy papers, don't take my word for it. Look up a PDF called Masters of the Skies, how they can win a nuclear war just using conventional weapons, not even using nuclear weapons. They've demonstrated through spiderweb that they can have agents on the ground and defeat Russia's launching systems asymmetrically. The strategy is to impoverish a nation and create the conditions in which you can buy people off. So you're going to buy people off. You're going to do asymmetrical sabotage. You're going to do a combination of cyber attacks. You're going to use your fancy Palantir battlefield simulation that will be able to account for 99% of the variables and see the mission to pinpoint precision, and perhaps only at the expense of maybe one or two nukes. That's the idea. I'm not saying it's going to work. You've been probing Russia's defenses for years. You've seen their capabilities. You've seen their best capabilities. This doesn't mean you're going to be able to escape any sort of nuclear reprisal, but it means if they can win, think about it. Think about how tantalizing a proposition. If we can get Russia and only take a dozen nukes, Russia, 70 trillion in resources, something crazy like that. And then you completely cut off the Chinese, and they now have to supplicate to the preeminent power of the known universe, the United States of America. That is why there will be no election in 2028. All the signs are there. They're preparing with haste. They don't care what people think. In fact, the more you riot, in their mind, the better. Because the more troops, the more boots they can put on the street. And unfortunately, there's so many NPC bootlickers out there who are signing their own fate that they're perfectly content watching people get gunned down by ICE agents because that somehow politically aligns with their point of view. Again, you can be very pro-ICE mandate, but you need to understand that this is a very slippery slope. And let's just say there is an election in 2028. When the tables turn, run. Run. For all you people who are cheering this, run. And that is why there won't be an election, because they know that. They know they've way overplayed their hand. And they know that the age that we're entering is not one of democracies. We're transitioning into a new technocratic age. Hopefully it's technocratic and it's not just some throwback to medieval times. Technocracy in the sense that it's going to be very inhuman. It's going to be very dystopian. And the same guy who flip-flops on everything is telling you everybody's going to be rich. That's what Elon is saying. Everybody's going to have robot butlers. And you're going to be wealthier beyond your wildest dreams. I do think that there is technology that will make that a possibility sometime. But Elon Musk is a liar. He's the Trojan horse. Okay, you need an Elon to sell people this shit. There are so many contradictory Elon posts, from AI is going to kill us all to I want to build the best AI. So if anybody kills us, it's me, to Trump's in the Epstein files, to Trump's my friend again, to why do we want to invade Iran, to, Iran's the arch enemy of the United States again. I mean, countless times, the most passive-aggressive, duplicitous man who just so happens to have the keys to the kingdom right now. And, yeah. It's going to go down. All these people know that they're all going to go down, which is why they can't have another election. They've just done way too many incriminating things. And because of that, they're going to go all the way. They're going to keep pushing the boundaries because they can just pardon. I mean, if they lose the House and the Senate, then maybe there's a chance. But even then, I don't think so. They've burned too many bridges at this point, and they're just proceeding with complete reckless abandon at this pace, irrespective of whatever sort of loss of political capital it might entail with the left. They just don't care anymore. The nations are so polarized that it doesn't matter. So, for that reason, this underscores the importance of prepping. And I don't know how we prep for this. I've known it's coming for some time. I thought that general preparedness would be sufficient. We need to start thinking specifically about how we're going to navigate this very dystopian environment that is right around the corner. And it's not going to be left. It's not going to be right. This is a uniparty paradigm that we're approaching. And it's going to be one in which the barbarians at the gates, as always, are going to be used to justify crackdowns on the population. And whatever Elon is telling you the future is going to be, I regret to inform you it's going to be the opposite. So the best thing you can do is put yourself in a position where you want to be. I would say the broadest advice I can provide is put yourself in a place where you want to be for the rest of your life, if at all possible, in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't even know if we have 2 to 3 years. That's best case scenario. Okay? Put yourself in a situation where you would be content in that place for the rest of your life. Because if and when the lights go out and they lock people down, and they lock up your bank accounts, and they shut off the internet, where you are is where you're going to stay. What you have is what you're going to have. What you know, if there's no internet access and you don't have your AI personal assistant that functions independent of the internet, that's all you're going to know. It's crystal clear to me that this is it. We don't have much time left.